Hey everybody, welcome back. I have my coworker Pamela Larkin. She has honestly been on before because we did a like managing some of the race relations with ourselves and with other people, but she is back and I am very excited for today's
Hey.
topic because well, we're talking about dating, which honestly I feel like it's fun for me and fun for you, Pam. It's fun for me because I mean, I need all the help I can get. And it's fun for you because you just love to work with people and their love stuff as a therapist. So,
I
um,
too.
yeah. So, I mean, I know COVID has been like a really interesting time to be just like talking about dating. So maybe,
Mhm.
um, maybe we can just like start with dating in COVID, but I'm also excited to maybe hear some of your thoughts on attachment, but we'll do that later. We'll get to that later. So,
Mhm.
um, I guess Pam, like to start, in your opinion, what's been like difficult in forming connections right now? Like how has dating and like starting relationships or maintaining that, what's just been like hard about it considering COVID?
Yeah. I think one thing that is really tricky about connection right now on COVID is that everyone is approaching social distancing in a different way. And so some people, are okay with masks. Other people don't want any type of closeness at all. And so I think I think that has been challenging to navigate, especially if you are engaging with someone who maybe has a different perspective than you do around what should be the precautions. And then I think the other challenge really is that COVID has made us more afraid of one another. And so even though there's this longing for connection, there's also this fear that if I get connected, that maybe I would get sick from that person or that I would make that other person sick. So I think that's just kind of a unique piece of COVID and
Yeah,
relationship.
I think so. I actually had gone on a date with somebody kind of near like the end of the stay-at-home order when things started to loosen up. And what was even funny is just kind of like when you first interact, even to be like, oh, I would normally just give someone a hug and like, hi, I'm Alex, or as like a normal greeting, but it was kind of like, oh, um, do I hug you? Do we wear masks? It's almost like you have to have this like 2 to 3 minute intro period that's super awkward. And
Mm-hmm.
and right now too, for good reason. I love what you're saying about people do social distance differently. Because I
Hmm.
notice even in my friendships or relationships at church or with my family that we do things differently.
Totally.
And it's very charged because it's hitting people in urban versus rural settings different, at socioeconomic status different, um, just like
Mhm.
people's values. It's really almost making people judge other people, which just is
100%.
not a great place for connection to form either,
Mm-mm.
I would think. I don't know if you agree with that.
No, I think you're absolutely right about it. It does hit on, because it's gotten so politicized, right? It hits on like what are your political values, and then if you have a faith, it hits on like what does your faith say about social distancing or COVID or the risk that you're putting yourself into. And then I think even professionally, it's like depending on if you are in the medical field, you may have a different perspective because you're still having to go into work on a daily basis, where someone who maybe isn't considered an essential worker doesn't have that experience, and so their fear is different. So it really is a little bit more charged, um, uh, in a way that has been different in the past. So
Right, because I feel like dating in general is a little charged because
totally.
people are figuring each other out, they're figuring out what they want and all this different stuff, and then also add like a really unprecedented times, as we keep saying. Um,
Yeah.
the fear of the fear is really resonating with me
Hmm.
because I've seen a lot of it, I think, just play out in different relationships, and it makes me kind of sad. actually. And
Mhm.
I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I just really, a question that I'm continually asking is, how is that, from a therapist perspective, is like, how is the COVID pandemic going to long-term affect people, whether
Mhm.
it's like trauma responses or like anxiety as it's related to like medical issues and germs, you know, or I don't know. I'm curious about some like the longitudinal effects of what we're going through, and I guess we won't really know until
Mhm.
it arrives. So
Yeah. You know, I think that this kind of deviates a little bit from dating, so we don't need to stay here. But the other piece that I think about is, what does it look like to be more cautious around helping your neighbor?
yeah,
Um, you know, I think COVID, especially in the beginning, everyone was like, we're all in this together, let's help one another out. But I think also there is this experience of, oh man, someone needs the door held open, but we're supposed to be social distancing. So do I hold the door open anymore? Um,
yeah,
you know, so yeah,
yeah,
just to echo, I think you're kind of concerned about like, what are the longitudinal effects
yeah.
on these fears?
And if people relationally in a general, if generally people are having these things show up in relationships, but then also like specifically within dating, I would imagine people are more lonely.
Mhm.
So like, what do you think is going on with people's loneliness? Like, are we facing a more lonely time? Is it looking different? How's it showing up in dating? Just some of that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I absolutely think that people are more lonely. I mean, I know I have been lonely at different points during the pandemic. There's three type of ways that I like to define loneliness. One is our intimate loneliness, and that's really intimacy in dating or marriage type relationships. That's what I mean when I say intimate loneliness.
Like romantic
Um,
partner.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you know, we see that for people who are married, if their marriage wasn't doing well pre-COVID, that gets highlighted during COVID, right? Because you're stuck with that person in the house and you have no other social support or even like space away from that person. So that can really, really, really highlight that loneliness. um, it can also, on the flip side, I've heard a lot of people say that COVID has strengthened their marriage. And so there is a potential of that as well. So that's the first piece of, that's the first loneliness. The second one that I see is relational. And that um, is really looking at our friendships and our coworker relationships. You know, I've talked to a couple of clients who said, I miss just having someone else to banter with day to day, right? Every time that we have a staff meeting and I see people in the office and I'm here at home, I get sad. I'm like, man, I really want to be like in the same space that you are. So I think that there's some loneliness that comes with that. And then the last loneliness is communal loneliness. And that is really looking at what does it look like to be a part of a community, whether that's a faith community, maybe that's your workout community, and not having access to doing the things that you usually do to pursue a shared purpose. I actually think that that is why, I mean, there's lots of reason for why more people have been engaged in protesting, but I wonder if that has something to do with why so many more people are showing up, because there's so many places where we don't get to show up in our humanness and to fight for a certain cause. And so I have been a little bit curious about that.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe for like the good, actually, like some communal
Hmm.
loneliness really actually hopefully a change agent if we want to look at it positively, I guess. Now,
Right.
I was hearing that a lot of kind of newly forming dating couples had to make a hard choice at the front end of the stay home
Hmm.
order, where they were like, okay, I'm either gonna not see you for
Yeah.
months essentially, or we could move in together and quarantine that it really kind of like um, escalated some of those processes.
Mhm.
Is there any other like quirky things that you've noticed that people have done that is atypical like that? I was trying to think of some myself other than that.
Yeah. Um, well, I think two things come to mind. One is people may decide to break up
Hmm.
right in the beginning of quarantine. Um, and I would say that that's for similar reasons that you're reflecting on. You know, I think um, going through this pandemic is hard. And do I want to do that? Do I want to add more hardness by being in a relationship that is not healthy?
Yeah.
Um, so I have heard of that. You know, I think the other thing is more around wedding stuff, and we can get into that a little bit later, but kind of the decisions that people make about, you know, do we elope? Do we decide that we're going to change our wedding venue or change all the things that we want just so that we can make sure that we can be together? So those are two of the things that I've heard of.
Yeah. I mean, what are you even just like noticing, if we kind of go back to that loneliness theme,
Mm.
um, what have you seen people creatively or not? Because part of this whole pandemic, I think I've been so encouraged by people's like creativity or their ability
Mhm.
to pivot, which is in a way, just like personally a high value of mine. I always want my options to pivot. Um,
Mhm.
but like, what have you seen? Even just maybe specifically the clients that you work with, some of your therapy clients.
Mhm.
Obviously, we don't disclose information that would like give away, but I'm curious if like any of your clients have engaged their loneliness and what are some things they're doing around it.
Yeah, great question. So, um, I have a couple clients who have really turned to online dating as an option, um, who have said, I recognize my relational loneliness and I want to do something about it.
Mhm.
And if I can't um, do my regular things of like meeting people in restaurants and bars and spiritual places or workout places, then I'm going to have to rely a little bit more on internet. So I've seen that from people. I've also seen people reconnect with old relationships,
I've seen that.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. For better or for worse, right? Sometimes that's a good thing, and other times it's not. Um, you know, I've seen people make certain decisions that they wouldn't normally make, but because they're longing for normalcy or a sense of normalcy, they they act in a different way than they usually would in their dating lives. Um,
Yeah. I was talking with a friend of mine, just a personal friend of mine, and at this point in time, a few weeks ago, he was telling me that at least like 11 or 12 high school to college previous people he hadn't talked to in years had reached out and were just like, hey, how you doing, but and
Mhm.
whatever their goal was with that, I cannot confirm nor deny what their goal was. But and he was saying like, I also have reached out to old loves, so that there is
Totally.
something about I wonder if it's just making, well, it's probably we're all just trying to cope, but also like making people a little more nostalgic, like looking back on the good old days.
Yeah.
I just wonder if that's at play at all, and maybe just like encouraging people, if you're in that moment, to see the relationship for the reality it was.
Hmm.
Almost like there maybe is a reason it didn't work out. So continuing to hold that in mind, but then also checking in to see like maybe people have like healed and grown, or all kinds of stuff at this
Right.
point in time. So it's I mean, maybe it's a good time to explore old relationships
Hmm.
uh, in that way. So
Yeah. Well, there's multiple ways to explore old relationships, right? You don't necessarily have to reach out to the person to explore like kind of what happened in the relationship. You know, I think we've seen an uptick in people reaching out for therapy during this time. And I think it's because people have more space, more time to reflect on things like that. I think the other thing that I have found interesting about kind of reaching out to old relationships is we feel like we can do that because we know everybody is suffering, or that we're all impacted by this. And so I think especially in the beginning, there was this like, oh my gosh, we've got to check in with each other. We've got to reconnect.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's, I think that's good, but I think that you're right. Like continuing to reflect on, is there a reason why that relationship didn't work out before?
Mhm.
And has anything changed?
Mhm. It's
Yeah.
easy. Well, like love, generally speaking for myself and maybe for other people, it's easy to get like swept up into the like process of it all and the excitement and
Mhm.
the hope of it all. And I think
Mhm.
sometimes like slowing it down and just being like, who is this person? Like, what am I noticing about them? What am I noticing about me as I engage with this person? Like, is my mood at all like shifted? Like, do they really seem
Mhm.
trustworthy or fun, or like have they explicitly said, I just want a casual thing right now, just to kind of
Yep.
pass the time? Or are they saying, no, I'm more like relationship ready? But just to kind of actually slow down the whirlwind of it all,
Mhm.
which is hard in normal dating, and also I would imagine maybe pandemic dating.
Mhm.
I feel like that should be a term, pandemic dating.
There probably will be.
I bet it is. I bet it's a trend. I bet it's already come and went as a trend. Honestly, I'm always time with that. But just like maybe actually the pandemic naturally allows it to slow down a bit because people are not as able to be
Mm.
as like face to face engaged.
Yeah.
And I've seen more people entertain the thought of a long distance relationship during the pandemic.
Yes.
Because I mean, here in Chicago, you could have been in the same neighborhood and it's still long distance potentially, depending on how people were quarantining. So
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Or what if you picked a state where the rules were a little bit more relaxed? So if you wanted to go visit them, you could, and you could have that kind of personal connection. I mean, I don't know how strategic people are being around it, but you really
I
could
think
use that to your advantage.
I think people have been pretty strategic. Kind of going on what I was saying earlier. I like
Mhm.
in a way this has been a terrible time, and people's like propensity for creativity has
Mm.
blown my mind. Even just in like
Yeah.
the meme culture has been very funny to me. Um, so I would imagine people are getting really creative, especially even like online dating platforms introduce like a video element to some of them, or
Mhm.
just different things like that. And yeah, so people are creative. If they want
Mhm.
to date and move things along, they're gonna date, I think. So
100%.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, how do you think people date during COVID? What's your hot tips for people dating in COVID?
Okay, so my hot tips for dating during COVID. I think um, even if it wasn't COVID, I would encourage people to continue to notice themselves in the midst of dating. So noticing what are the things that are kind of making me uncomfortable, what are the things that are making me excited about this relationship. I think that there is enough space, enough time to pause and reflect while you're going through the process.
Yeah.
Um, so I definitely would continue to encourage that. I think that as people are moving into this, I mean, people have been doing online dating for a while, but I think just what I've noticed from some of my clients is their attachment wounds that get triggered. So with the anxious attachment style, that is someone who needs lots of reassurance that this person is still interested in them. And so where I've seen that show up is people are a little bit more cautious than with online dating. And what I mean by that is like they want to make sure that that their score for matching is really high, or you know, if a certain part of someone's profile isn't complete, then they'll ask them to complete it. Or I've seen people literally ask kind of all along, like, hey, how does this feel to you? What do you think? Do you like me? You know, and so it's interesting that that type of wound can still get triggered even if it's online.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And I would say, you and I both agree with this from a therapist perspective, probably, that like attachment theory is essentially how our early relationships, specifically with our primary caregivers, impact how we are in a relationship in adulthood.
mm-hmm.
And they're essentially the strategies that we put on to get what we need. So you have, like you said, the anxious type who are more kind of hyper vigilant about checking in,
Mm-hmm.
um, because that's the strategy they've put on to make sure that everything's okay. And then you have avoidance, and the strategy to just like deal with it is more kind of like distance and space. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously, like, attachment is so much deeper than that. But what's interesting is oftentimes an anxious and avoidant person, to some degree or the other, end up coupling. And that
Yes.
ends up being I think it's important for people to tune in, because you have maybe an anxious style who's like, hello. And then you have an avoidant person who's like, da-da, and it just like ends up creating this, like, little dance until this person gets frustrated and pulls back. And then this person
Mm-hmm.
goes, oh no, that's not what I wanted. And then they come and re-engage, but often it starts this thing over again. And
Mm-hmm.
people can just know their attachment style, know how it impacts them, how it impacts a relationship. I think
Mm-hmm.
you and I would both agree that that's like prime.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, and also just being able to ask for what you need. But,
Mhm.
you know, being aware of what you need and then being able to ask for it.
Yeah.
And being okay letting a relationship go if you can't get those things that you're asking for.
Yeah.
Um,
That actually, if I can speak personally, that actually was for me in a relationship that I was exploring in COVID, ended up
mhm,
being, probably for both of us, but I think only speaking for me, it's like, oh, you're not in the same place that I am.
mm,
And that means something for me. And although I really enjoyed this person and enjoyed dating, it was kind of like, oh, maybe actually this is not going to give me what I need at this point in time. It may come up again, it may not. I don't know what's going to happen
mhm,
with that relationship, but
mhm,
using that lens of like needs as a way to just like filter through moving forward or stopping or just slowing it down in a relationship.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
But letting it go then is the hardest thing. I think that's the process that I get to be in now. Having made a decision, it's now kind of like, let it go? So,
Mhm,
yeah.
mhm.
What about getting married in COVID?
Oh man. Um, you know, I wouldn't have advocated for this before COVID, but now I'm like, do what you need to do to get married. Like there's time to do the big wedding, the party where everybody comes. But I think if COVID has shown us anything, like we have had to figure out like who are our people. And if I have to limit who is in my space, um, I want it to. I, I don't want to be separated from the people who are my people. And so, especially if you are someone who is not living with your partner and is kind of waiting to get married so that you can be in the same space, I say do what you can to get married right away. um, so I think I have advocated for that more. I think it's also been really cool to see, as you were talking before about the ways that people have been creative and dating, creative also in weddings, right? So I've seen people have like food trucks at their wedding where it's like a pancake bar or like an ice cream truck. I've seen people who've done like you know, their immediate family is there, in a backyard, and then they're Zooming live, or they let people drive through, to congratulate the couple. And when they're driving through, the couple gives them a cupcake or like a cookie or something to say like, hey, we're so glad that you joined us on that experience. And so obviously it's not, I think, what anybody hoped for in terms of a wedding, but I also just feel like there are some really, really cool ways to do it, you know, and I think the benefit of it being smaller is it can be more intimate, and you can actually have time to talk to the people who have shown up for your wedding, as opposed to these like drive-by 2-second conversations. So
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that makes.
yeah.
So maybe my last question for you, Pam, and then we'll kind of wrap it up is,
Hmm.
I started this hour. This is just something I know about you because we are friends and we work together. But,
Hmm.
I think even on your bio video on your website, on our website bio is like, I love working with love, you know? So to
Yeah.
just say like, why do you like to work with people around
Mm.
their romantic longing, desire, relationships? Why do you love working with love as a therapist?
Oh man. Um, you know, I think that I love talking about love, because I was single for quite a long time. I didn't get married until I was 30, and 30 felt like such a long time. And I really struggled in my loneliness. I was not the person who was content with being alone. Like I really had like a deep desire and longing for it. And so um, I it matters to me that people feel that they are not alone and that they do feel satisfied in their relationships. And that if, you know, if they want to be in a relationship, that there's a way to go about finding it. Um, so I think that, yeah, I think that's why I just kind of, I don't want people to feel alone. So,
So
yep.
like love, favorite video hand motion.
You always do it so well. It really always looks like a heart.
Definitely didn't arrive. We got some efforts going on over the pandemic. So much just for coming on here, sharing a bit of what you're seeing, and just like hopefully, I think people can just like tune in to their own like dating stories, their own dating narratives, during
Mhm.
and I guess we would all probably just continue people to be like safely creative, that
Mhm.
maybe now more than ever, uh, flexing some of that creative muscle to like meet and get to know people, whether it's online or any other kind of like means. So thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, Alex. My
Yeah.
pleasure. See ya.